So Barry, we're here with Barry Jamieson, Englishman in New York. Reminds me of a Sting song, actually. So how did you end up here?
Well, I've been working with Sasha on and off for probably the best part of 20 years. We've known each other since probably '89 when we first met each other in Manchester. Sasha was at university there and was DJing, and I was in a band called Evolution for a long time with another guy, John Sutton, and we were doing a lot of music in and around Manchester at the time, just before all of that kind of took off. And then a lot of the places where we're going out and doing gigs, Sasha was DJing, so we'd never actually been in a studio before, so we said to him, do you fancy doing a remix of one of our records? So it's like, yeah. So we kind of got together and did a couple of things that turned out really, really well, and we were doing it basically selling records out of the boot of our car. We didn't kind of put together that there's this thing called distribution. We were doing it all out of a bloody Ford Orion, and a lot of it was to do with Sasha's profile, because he was really getting a name about himself. That the record did really, really well. So it kind of was a stepping stone for us to kind of get started, and definitely for Sasha. And he kind of went off and went down to London and started getting a team of people around him, to do his production and stuff down in London. And then I went off with my career with my band and stuff. And then when I decided to come out to the US, Sasha had recently moved here, and we hadn't kind of hung out or anything for a long time. And he said, "Are you here in LA?" I was like, "Yeah."
When was this?
This was 2002,
okay.
2003. So he's like, I haven't really done any music since Air Drawn Dagger, do you fancy getting together? So I was like, yeah. So, came out to Florida and, just spent about 6 or 7 weeks at the house, working with him and the rest of the guys that were doing stuff with him, Guyton and that, and Charlie May from Spooky. And, it really kind of clicked. So the kind of first big project we got into was Sasha's Involver album, which was definitely something of a benchmark for a DJ, because instead of it just being a conventional sort of mix of other people's music, we decided to approach the people whose music it was and get the parts, and we basically reinvent all of their music to fit in with the album. So everybody we asked said yeah, and we pieced the whole thing together, and it became a really kind of big record for him. It was the #1 downloaded album in the US on iTunes for electronic music that year, and it only got released in September. So we kind of took everyone on by storm, and then and at the time as well, we were using Ableton because we couldn't have done it without it really, because we were using Pro Tools was the kind of main staple part of the working environment, but just the way you can manipulate audio within Ableton as a kind of as a canvas for getting your ideas together. We'd start figuring out what really, really works from a mix point of view as a DJ, and then if we need to do any time stretching of any stuff, or we needed to pitch any records up or down a couple of keys to get them to work, we'd figure it out in Ableton, then do all the time stretching in Pro Tools because it was the best engine at the time, and then rebuild the mixes within Ableton, and then the last stage of the album was done in Pro Tools. So that kind of became our kind of work kind of ethos from that point out. We've always had a lot of outboard, some high-end stuff, so we tend to try and get things down kind of raw to start with, just to get the ideas and the elements down, and then when we've got the track pretty much a rough outline of what we want to do, we'd then have like an overdubbing session, and everything would come back out of the computer through the outboard and back in. So, EQ-wise and stuff was always kind of done with the hardware. We had a couple of other boxes as well, but the GML's been one of the main ones. And then when we get it back in the computer, the EQ part of the mix is more or less just getting things to knit together. You're not really designing the sounds again, you're just making them all fit in those little pockets. From a mix point of view, the inflator and the limiter have been kind of used on everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, everything Yeah, whether you're designing
individual
bass
parts
sounds.
or
Oh yeah, individual parts as well. Yeah, I use inflator on like a drums bus and stuff like that, or on the bass. Because the way I usually work, same way Sasha's kind of worked for a long time. There's a lot of layering of sounds to create one element. So you know, with a bass sound, like you would with a live band, there'd be like a direct DI input. There'd be an amp, and there'd also be a couple of, you know, mics in the room for a bit of ambience, and that would be your balance to get your bass sound. But we do the same thing with synths. You know, there'd be one channel which might have a guitar pedal stuff on, or it'd be guitar rig, and then there'd be another one which would just be a raw bass line straight out of one of the analog bits of kit for the real kind of low end, and then any other things that were textures, and they'd all be kind of grouped together, and then there'd be a bus with your compressor, your EQ and whatever else to basically get it all to gel, and then that would be your output. So we'd always end up with kind of 3 or 4 bus groups. So to totally simplify the mix, so the kind of last kind of balance stage of the whole mix would just be these 8 faders instead of the whole bloody session, which could be 40 or 50 tracks.
Yeah.